Day at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. That can mean just one thing. It's time for the goRIA live stream. I'm Chuck Vela, and as I normally like to do on these Wednesday afternoons is put a spotlight on what's new on goRIA.com. And what we have new for you this week is a podcast that I recorded just a couple of weeks ago with Jeff Schwantz, who's the Chief Revenue Officer over at Advisor360. And we talked about a very, very important topic, which is transitioning your book of business to the RIA space. So as you're putting together your game plan for how you're going to go independent, one of the most important things is that transition, right? I know it's a very stressful time for advisors. I've done it myself, right? As I have said a number of times, I'm a breakaway advisor personally. I went RIA about 5 years ago. I had to make my own transition. And we're going to talk about with Jeff, and I'm going to share with you in just a moment a little preview clip, but the full version is up on the website right now. But we talked about how to transition if you're coming from a protocol firm, how to transition if you're coming from a non-protocol firm. You know, spoiler alert, that's a little harder to do, but we share with you some tips on how to make that better and easier, some pitfalls to avoid, and everything else in between. So here's a little taste of what Jeff and I talked about. That next week, I mean, wasn't it like a week after Morgan Stanley left the protocol, then UBS left the protocol?
Correct.
And now he was kind of hosed, right? He did not want to make that non-protocol transfer. Is it doable? Yes. Is it harder? You bet. So with that said, please continue with that thought.
No, exactly. So again, let's make sure that we're walking in this with eyes wide open. Let's be emotionally prepared for it. So broker protocol, right? That's number one. I'd say the next big thing to navigate is Reg SP. So just in short, it's the privacy policies. It's what's going on. You know, when you're joining a new firm, how do you communicate? How do you re-engage with clients? What that whole process. And what's interesting to look at and understand, Chuck, is just how do firms interpret the different policies, the privacy policies, slightly different. There's some nuances there. And I'll just give you an example if that's okay. So some have interpreted it to say literally the day that that advisor joins, that they can leverage that client information to start that onboarding process. Others have looked at it and said, you know what? We would actually like that client to give us some signal that they actually want to join the advisor at the new firm. So there's just a couple of things of like, hey, what's the posture of the organization that you're joining? What do they normally do? All of kind of these are the elements that we think are important, and part of that due diligence is just like, hey, walk me through how you think about it, right? What do you do? What's your interpretation of that? There's a lot around Reg SP. Some of the independent firms, if you're duly registered, you know, so you're with FINRA and the SEC, you've got FINRA 2273, you've got to send disclosures within 3 business days. You know, on the RIA side, it's being able to disclose the CRSs. You know, it's just everything is so important too around what's your resignation date, you know, what's your new join date, making sure that's really super crisp and clear what's happening and whatnot.
So again, that's just a little taste of what Jeff and I were talking about with regards to transitioning your book to the RIA space. And to be sure, this is going to be one of those episodes you're going to want to have pen and paper handy, because there's a lot of really specific actionable items that we cover that you're really going to want to keep in mind to give yourself the best possible transition, the safest one, the one with the least amount of hassle and disruption to your business. So this really is a great episode to listen to, especially if you're pretty close to pulling that trigger. Give this a listen. I promise you'll find a few tips that you're going to be glad that you knew about before you actually make your transition. So it's up there right now, live on goRIA.com. So that's it for today. So on behalf of goRIA, fueled by Investment News, I'm Chuck Vela, and I'll see you here next Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, he tried to say. Thanks for joining us. Take care.